Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha reads like a myth, but it operates as a rigorous phenomenological exploration of the human condition. It maps a very specific problem: how a person actually achieves self-actualization when every established system of learning fails them. To understand the novel, we have to look at how it separates knowledge from wisdom. Epistemological knowledge is information. It can be categorized, written down in a book, and successfully transferred from a teacher to a student through language. This diagram represents that divide. On the left is knowledge, moving neatly between nodes. On the right is ontological wisdom. Ontology is the philosophical study of being. This kind of wisdom is a state of existence, highly subjective, inherently ineffable, and impossible to teach. This creates the central tension of Siddhartha's life. He realizes that to achieve this unteachable state of being, he has to systematically master and then abandon every established philosophy of his era. The journey to genuine enlightenment requires a person to deliberately exhaust perfectly functioning systems of knowledge to discover where their limits lie. The author, Hermann Hesse, built this narrative to interrogate the nature of truth using Eastern metaphysical frameworks. He draws heavily on Indian knowledge systems, specifically merging the ethical paradigms of Buddhism with Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta is a Hindu philosophy focused on the non-dual realization that the individual soul, or Atman, is inseparable from the universal reality, Brahman. To structure Siddhartha's progression toward this realization, Hesse uses a Hegelian dialectic. A dialectic is a logical process where a starting idea, the thesis, is opposed by a contradictory idea, the antithesis, eventually resolving into a synthesis that integrates truths from both. Siddhartha's spiritual wandering is highly intentional. It is a precise, mechanized progression of trial, error, and eventual integration. The dialectic begins with the thesis, intellectual and ritualistic conformity. Siddhartha starts his life immersed in the orthodox traditions of a Brahmin son. He achieves complete mastery over this inherited doctrine. He learns the exact Vedic recitations and excels in complex philosophical discourse. This animated diagram models his realization. Despite executing rituals with absolute precision, external inputs only reach the perimeter. A profound existential void remains at the center. The architecture of Orthodox religion imparts facts, but lacks the mechanical ability to trigger internal psychological change. Scriptural authority succeeds in transmitting epistemological knowledge, but it cannot catalyze ontological transformation. Recognizing the limit of orthodoxy, Siddhartha pivots to the antithesis. He joins the Samanas and adopts their practice of radical asceticism and physical self-denial. The core objective of the ascetic approach is to systematically negate and erase the ego entirely through starvation and exposure. Looking at this structural model of his ascetic phase, Siddhartha deduces a failure. The goal of erasing the self is impossible. Extreme denial functions as temporary anesthesia. Aggressively suppressing the self forces human desires to persist in latent, hidden forms, waiting to resurface. Physical denial proves to be an incomplete vehicle for enlightenment. Escaping the self through starvation is not the same as mastering it. This brings Siddhartha to the philosophical climax of the dialectic, his interaction with Gautama Buddha. His companion Govinda represents the human dependency on structured dogma. Govinda hears the teachings and immediately accepts them, finding comfort in the institution. Siddhartha remains skeptical. Siddhartha acknowledges that the Buddha's spiritual attainment is completely flawless. The Buddha has achieved actual enlightenment. This diagram visualizes Siddhartha's reason for rejecting the Buddha as a teacher. The specific laws of enlightenment cannot be transferred through a linguistic medium. Doctrinal adherence risks substituting authentic, lived experience with a flattened, hollow imitation of someone else's realization. Even the most perfect truth must be autonomously realized. It cannot be collectively consumed or handed down by a master. To bridge the gap between spiritual theory and human reality, Siddhartha deliberately plunges into Maya. Maya is the philosophical concept denoting the illusion of the phenomenal material world. He learns the mechanics of this world through two threshold figures. Kamala teaches him eros and sensual experience, and Kamaswami introduces him to commerce and earthly attachment. We can model this materialist phase here. Siddhartha achieves rapid worldly success, deeply integrating into the chaotic network of commerce and accumulating earthly attachments. Over years, this success devolves into nausea, a profound existential stagnation and hedonistic fatigue. This decline illustrates dukkha, the Buddhist principle that attachment to transient things mechanically generates suffering when they inevitably fade. Hesse critiques unrestrained materialism as fiercely as ascetic extremism. The materialist immersion proves that both ends of the behavioral spectrum are dead ends. The fatigue of the materialist cycle drives Siddhartha to a period of suicidal despair. He reaches the absolute limit of his earthly attachments. His final pedagogical force is not a human teacher, but nature itself. He studies under Vasudeva, guided by the receptive wisdom of the river. The river acts as the master symbol for synthesizing all the opposing dialectical phases Siddhartha survived: the intellect of the Brahmin, the denial of the ascetic, and the indulgence of the merchant. This diagram demonstrates how the river destroys the illusion of linear time. It reveals the simultaneity of past, present, and future. Listening closely, the water's polyphonic sound merges into the primordial syllable Om, representing total integration with the cosmos. True enlightenment does not occur as a sudden, transcendent rupture. It is a cumulative, imminent realization built directly on the foundation of past failures. Hesse's ultimate philosophical vision requires the total integration of all facets of human experience. The sacred and the profane, the intellectual and the sensual, must all be absorbed. The journey proves a core distinction. Wisdom is an internal state of being. It is never an external acquisition that can be handed to you. Siddhartha endures in the literary canon because it affirms that wisdom is the phenomenology of living. It is the silent, experiential recognition of the unity of all things.